Hey guys, tonight we're heading to 18th century France, where powdered wigs, candlelit mirrors, and courtly intrigues surround a single, unexpected object of desire, the pineapple. You're not hallucinating from sleep deprivation, this really happened. The French elite once obsessed so fiercely over this spiky tropical fruit that it practically became currency, status sliced into golden wedges. Picture this, you're gliding down the hall of mirrors at Versailles, shoes clicking softly on the marble floor, candlelight reflecting 1,000-fold. Perfume clouds the air, thick enough to taste, and every guest you pass has eyes not on each other, but on the giant pineapple poised like royalty at the center of a crystal banquet table. It sits there, smug as a cat in a sunbeam, glowing under wax tapers, untouched and absolutely untouchable. You lean in to inspect it, maybe you even poke it when no one's looking, and it smells unreal, all sugar and warmth, like it came from a place where the sun isn't just decorative. But here's your first reality check. You probably won't survive this era if you're not noble, or obscenely rich, or a pineapple. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I want to know, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Drop that in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your breath fogs slightly as you wander closer to the banquet. You're still dressed like a servant, borrowed waistcoat and all, but no one notices. Their eyes are glued to that pineapple. And not because they're hungry. Oh no. It's because that fruit, native to South America and rarer than decency in a courtier's heart, means power. You can almost hear the whispers. Madame du Barry brought it in from Martinique. It ripened in His Majesty's own orangery. It costs more than my annual dowry. A few nobles even pretend to know how to cut it, though really, they're just caressing it with silver knives like a sacred relic. You duck under the table for a second, yes, really, to avoid being spotted by a footman. Down there, someone's dropped a note, probably full of scandal. You slide it into your pocket because you're nosy like that. But just before you stand, you peek back up and realize there's only one pineapple in the whole room. That's the point. The presence of one makes everyone else look like they don't have one. And in 18th century France, not having something ridiculous was basically social death. Mainstream historians agree that the pineapple's journey into French hearts and mouths was a mix of colonial trade, botanical obsession, and good old-fashioned social panic. The fruit came from the Caribbean, of course, specifically from colonies like Saint-Domingue, and was nearly impossible to keep fresh on the voyage. That made each surviving specimen a kind of edible miracle. The king had his own private greenhouse operation dedicated solely to coaxing these reluctant guests into ripening, using coal fires and glass structures imported from England. Because obviously England had started the pineapple trend first. Don't tell Versailles, they're still bitter about that. Historians still argue whether the obsession began with Louis XIV or trickled in from English horticulturists in the late 1600s. What's clear is that by the mid-1700s, the pineapple wasn't food, it was theater. You pass a row of seated duchesses now, all fanning themselves in choreographed motion. They gossip about the pineapple like it's a celebrity. One claims to have tasted it once. Just a sliver, thinner than lace. While another swears she owned one for 3 hours before returning it to its grower. The first woman gasps as if that's scandalous. You touched it with bare hands? You notice something else. No one's actually eating the pineapple. That would be like licking the Mona Lisa. The fruit's presence is performative, prestige over pleasure, scarcity over sustenance. Occasionally, nobles rent pineapples just to display at dinners. They get returned later, sometimes used again. If fruit could talk, this one would be screaming. You keep walking. The dining room is decked out in its most tropical illusions, tapestries of parrots and palms, sugared hibiscus confections, and more than one waiter in a silk shirt printed with pineapples. A risky move, given how symbolic the fruit is. Wearing pineapples when you don't own one is like flexing a Ferrari key when you live in your aunt's basement. One fringe tidbit you pick up? Some of the earliest attempts at growing pineapples in France involved not greenhouses, but manure pits, a combination of horse dung and straw, fermented just right to generate heat. The smell? Exactly what you'd expect. The results? Occasionally edible. Pineapples were high maintenance from day one. You finally reach the edge of the room and catch the eye of a bored noble, probably someone's cousin's mistress. She beckons you over with a flick of her fan, then whispers, "They'll fight over it by dessert. Watch the Comte de Rohan. He always tries to slice off the top to take home." You glance at the fruit again. The candlelight flickers, giving it a golden halo. You can almost hear the collective yearning in the room. Not for taste, but for the idea of tasting. The pineapple represents somewhere warmer, richer, more exotic. It's luxury distilled. Status with skin. And all of it, this fawning, this glassy-eyed reverence, stems from a fruit you can now find for $3.99 at any grocery store. Time's weird like that. You stay near the back of the banquet hall, pretending to examine a floral arrangement that smells faintly of honey and desperation. Across the room, someone chuckles too loudly at a joke you missed, probably about pineapples again. The obsession's inescapable. It clings to the air more stubbornly than powdered sugar on a lace cuff. You don't blame them, though. That fruit, golden, spiked, and sun-soaked, has become the ultimate trophy. Not just a symbol of hospitality like in colonial America, oh no. In France, it's a declaration: I have resources, connections, and taste. You might not even need a title if you have the right fruit in your foyer. And believe it or not, people were measured by it. A noble's ability to secure a pineapple for a gathering could boost, or sink, their reputation faster than a poorly choreographed minuet. You once overheard a viscountess whisper that she'd refused a marriage proposal because the suitor's family served poached pears instead of pineapple at their New Year's ball. Harsh? Maybe. But in 18th century France, status wasn't earned, it was curated. And pineapples made the perfect centerpiece. You slip out of the hall and into a side corridor, your footsteps muffled by velvet carpeting. In a smaller salon, you find a painting. It's massive, full of soft golds and powdered faces, and dead center in the composition, a pineapple cradled by a porcelain hand. This is no background fruit. It's the climax of the canvas. That's because owning, or even borrowing, a pineapple was seen as proof of your superiority. Not just in wealth, but in your worldliness. You weren't merely rich, you were cultured, tropical, and above the mundane constraints of seasonal produce. What's wild is that many of these pineapples weren't even edible by the time they arrived. Some were too bruised from travel, others overripened in hastily built greenhouses. Didn't matter. No one planned to eat them anyway. A rotten pineapple still held more social weight than a perfectly ripe apple. Why? Because everyone knew apples grew in France. Pineapples, though, they had to be imported or, better yet, coaxed from the grip of nature in a coal-heated orangery built solely for that purpose. You pass a servant hurrying past with a silver tray. There's no pineapple on it, just pineapple-shaped pastries. And that's another twist. The actual fruit was so rare that chefs began recreating it in meringue, pâte à choux, and even spun sugar. They'd form fake pineapples with such devotion that some guests didn't realize they were biting into flour and egg until it collapsed in their mouths. One fringe obsession? Pineapple hats. No, really. For a brief and slightly tragic fashion moment, noblewomen wore towering powdered wigs topped with faux pineapples, often made of beeswax or tightly packed pomade and lace. You imagine one woman turning too quickly near a candle and turning her tropical dream into a small, elegant inferno. It probably happened. Historians still argue whether these pineapple coiffures were expressions of sincere admiration or subtle satire, but either way, they were real. And flammable. You finally make it to the royal greenhouse. Or at least, what passes for one. It's massive. Arched glass panels run the length of the structure, casting dim reflections as you step inside. The air here is warmer, damp. It smells like soil, steam, and something lightly fermented, probably a forgotten batch of banana wine. Inside, men in tailored coats gently inspect the pineapples growing in raised wooden beds. Coal fires burn along the sides, feeding warm air under the floorboards, while mirrors redirect any available light toward the plants. This is luxury agriculture, more performance art than farming. One gardener turns and eyes you. He's got smudges on his cuffs and the tired smile of someone whose entire livelihood depends on the whims of fruit and court gossip. This one, he says, pointing proudly, has grown half an inch this week. You nod as if you know what that means. He tells you that this particular pineapple has been under cultivation for 18 months. No interruptions, he boasts. No frost. No mold. No sniffy courtiers breathing too close. And if it makes it to harvest in another few weeks, it'll be boxed in velvet, escorted by carriage, and presented at a duchess's name day. You ask what happens if it dies. He shrugs. We paint it. And there it is. Even in death, the pineapple gets immortalized. Some noble families even commission pineapple portraits. Imagine it, a giant oil painting of a fruit sitting majestically on a cushion, surrounded by cherubs and drapery. It's less still life, more glamour shot. And it made sense. Portraits were how you proved your social clout before Instagram. Why not use your rare fruit as a stand-in for your rarefied taste? The greenhouse creaks as someone else enters. It's a young nobleman, probably 19, with his hair powdered too white and shoes too shiny. He walks straight to a bed of not quite ripe pineapples, sniffs the air, and sighs like a poet. They remind me of the colonies, he murmurs to no one in particular. You nearly choke trying not to laugh. He's never been further south than Marseille. You follow him back outside into the chill air. A carriage is waiting, loaded with an empty display pedestal, prepped for tomorrow's salon. A footman cradles a single pineapple in cloth, as if it were a newborn. And just like that, the fruit is gone, off to serve its brief, glamorous purpose at another gathering, where it will sit untouched yet longed for. Like fame. Like youth. Like that last croissant no one wants to be seen eating. You drift back through the grand corridors of the chateau, trailing the scent of warm wax and powdered citrus, and the closer you get to the royal apartments, the more artificial everything starts to feel. That's not just your sleep-deprived imagination, it's by design. Here, illusions matter more than comfort. The illusion of power. The illusion of pleasure. Even the illusion that pineapples were worth the toll they took on teeth. Because tonight, you're about to watch King Louis XV himself ruin his dental health for the sake of status. You slip into a gallery just outside the king's private dining salon, technically off-limits, but your borrowed livery still fools most guards. From behind a velvet curtain, you peer inside. The king sits alone with his dessert, hunched in that oddly fragile way only the truly powerful can manage. On his gilded plate, a few translucent slices of preserved pineapple glistening in syrup, neatly arranged like coins. He lifts one with a gold fork and slides it into his mouth. A moment later, his expression twitches. You know that look. It's the universal language of tooth pain. He chews through it anyway, of course. He's the king. He has no choice. Louis XV is addicted to sugar, candies, fruit preserves, candied violets, and pineapples, soaked in syrup and reduced in copper pans for hours, are his guilty pleasure. Never mind that his teeth are so decayed, some fall out whole. Never mind that his breath reportedly smells like a dying orchard. Royalty suffers in silence. Historians still argue whether his sugar obsession stemmed from boredom, indulgence, or a deeper dissatisfaction with power itself. But the pineapple was more than a treat, it was a ritual. And rituals, as you'll see tonight, are what hold this gilded world together, no matter how rotten its core becomes. You spot a doctor nearby, one of the many who rotate through court life like fashionable ghosts. He carries a small velvet pouch filled with opium-laced tinctures for exactly these moments. Tooth pain, after all, can't interrupt the theater of kingship. You turn your attention to the courtiers waiting outside the salon. They're not invited to eat, of course, only to watch. They know that being seen near the pineapple is nearly as valuable as tasting it. One man drops a comment to the woman beside him. It came from the hothouse in Choisy. Ripened in the king's own sun. Which is nonsense, obviously. The king doesn't have his own son. But you smile anyway. He says it with such conviction. A young page rushes past with a tray of candied citrus, decoys mostly. The real attraction has already been consumed. But none of the nobles complain. Instead, they marvel over it in retrospect. His Majesty took 2 bites, whispers a lady in blue silk. No, 3, says her companion. I counted. You linger behind the curtain a moment longer and catch a fringe detail. A tiny, engraved spoon nestled beside the king's plate. Not gold, not silver, porcelain. Made in Sèvres, most likely, specially commissioned for fruit preserves. Rumor has it the handle is shaped like a pineapple stem. You wonder if even his cutlery feels superior. You head back toward the grand corridor and nearly trip over a boy crouched by the wall. He's maybe 10, a royal page or scullery assistant judging by the soot on his cuffs. He's peeling a sliver of pineapple from a discarded dish, eyes wide with reverence. You say nothing, just nod, and keep walking. He's not stealing food. He's sampling status. There's something undeniably sad about how much this court wants a taste of something it barely understands. Pineapples, once a genuine novelty, have become a performance. And like any good theater, the costumes outshine the plot. But don't feel too bad. These same nobles will brag about their pineapple consumption for weeks. Some keep little jars of the juice to dab on handkerchiefs, claiming it improves the complexion. Others mix it with rosewater and sprinkle it over their wigs, hoping to impress their lovers, or their enemies, depending on the night. And here's the real kicker. Most of them can't describe what pineapple tastes like. You've heard one baron say it was like honey mixed with lightning. Another claimed it evokes the sensation of horseback riding near the sea. Sure, man. Let's go with that. One quirky little rumor you hear tonight? There's a gentleman at court who believes pineapples help with fertility. He keeps one under his pillow, wrapped in lace, naturally, and replaces it monthly. So far, no heirs. But plenty of sticky linens. You duck into a smaller salon where a group of nobles are reenacting the king's dessert moment for laughs. A rotund marquis pretends to chew while clutching his jaw, and everyone howls. The pineapple, they joke, has more bite than any court intrigue. Then someone says, I heard the Dauphine can't stand the taste. She spat hers into a napkin. Gasps. Laughter. Because rejecting pineapple is social suicide, even in private. Whether or not she actually disliked it, the story is enough to raise eyebrows. In this place, rumors are as nourishing as fruit. You're nearly at the exit when you notice a small fresco on the ceiling. You wouldn't have seen it if you weren't craning your neck to scratch it. But there it is, a cherub offering a pineapple to a nobleman with a powdered wig as tall as a sheep. It's absurd. And kind of adorable. And in a weird way, it captures the moment perfectly. France in the 18th century didn't just crave opulence, it worshipped it. Even when it rotted their teeth. Even when it emptied their coffers. Even when it dribbled down their chins and left a stain on their napkins they pretended not to notice. Because in the end, the pineapple wasn't food. It was fantasy. And fantasy, unlike fruit, never spoils. You leave the palace proper and step into the night air, grateful for the chill after so much candlelit opulence. The sky above Versailles is velvet dark, studded with stars that somehow feel less distant than the lives lived within those walls. You follow a gravel path that winds around the outer gardens and past marble statues, silent witnesses to centuries of excess. Tonight, you're headed to one of the quiet marvels of the 18th century, the pineapple greenhouses, those steamy sanctuaries where fruit was treated more delicately than infants. Technically, they're called orangeries, though what they grow now is far more elite than your average orange. You reach the edge of the garden and press through an ivy-covered gate. Ahead of you, nestled into the earth and humming softly with warmth, are the king's experimental glass houses. Inside? A single, tropical miracle cultivated by sheer force of aristocratic will. The moment you step in, it hits you, the heat, the dampness, and the smell of damp loam and something lightly sweet, like a fruit market hidden in the wrong climate. Glass panels arch overhead, laced with condensation. Coal-burning furnaces grumble in alcoves beneath the floor, pumping heat into a system of flues and vents so that every pineapple plant can bask like it's still in Martinique. You pass a gardener, more chemist than farmer, tweaking the furnace controls. His fingers are blackened with soot, and his coat is singed at the edges. He mutters to himself. Too hot and they melt, too cold and they sulk. You don't ask who they are. You know. The pineapple plants are practically royalty in here, and some have more attendants than minor dukes. These glass palaces were inspired by English hothouses, but the French added their signature flair. They didn't just grow pineapples. They choreographed them. Each plant was rotated slightly each day to distribute light evenly. They were watered with warm spring water, massaged with soft cloths to prevent bruising, and even spoken to, in the belief that gentle voices encouraged better fruiting. One particularly enthusiastic noble allegedly hired a harpist to play sonatas at dusk for his pineapples. Historians still argue whether the plants appreciated the music, or merely tolerated it with leafy indifference. You walk along a path lined with raised beds. The pineapples are short, proud creatures, sitting atop waxy rosettes of leaves, their golden hides peeking out like guarded treasure. You pause by one particularly robust specimen, marked with a handwritten tag, Pour la Duchesse d'Yenville, any pot toucher. Noted. A footman tiptoes past you carrying a copper watering can. Not a drop spills. These plants drink better than half of France. He nods at you solemnly, then continues down the row, whispering something that might be a lullaby. And here's the strange, beautiful contradiction: all of this effort, all of it, is for a fruit that often fails to live up to the hype. Homegrown French pineapples, despite all their pampering, tend to be small, fibrous, and slightly acidic. Nothing like the Golden Globes arriving from the West Indies. But that wasn't the point. The goal wasn't taste, it was provenance. Grown in France was the badge of honor, like a noble title attached to your fruit. Flavor could be doctored. Prestige could not. You stop at a workbench near the back of the greenhouse. A tray sits there, holding dissected pineapples at various stages of ripeness. A notebook lies open, filled with sketches and poetic notes. One entry reads, "Spines blunted by frost, still proud, still defiant." Someone's in love, clearly. You find the gardener again, Monsieur Lenoir, his name tag says. He tells you about the latest disaster. A shipment of rare pineapple seeds from Barbados was confiscated by a rival noble who claimed priority as a royal cousin. Never mind that he's actually a third cousin by marriage to someone the king once met at a baptism. Court logic. You lean on the bench, listening as Lenore explains how they simulate the tropics with charcoal dust, sheep's wool, and mirrors. Mirrors, he says with a wink, make the fruit think it is admired. As it should be. You're not sure if he's joking, but you laugh anyway. A quirky bit of lore surfaces here. Some botanists believed pineapples would grow better if exposed to feminine voices. This led to a strange but earnest experiment in which court ladies were invited to speak to the plants each afternoon. Très charmant. One duchess was said to coo, cradling a pineapple sprout in her lace-gloved hand. Grow for me, mon petit roi. The plant did not respond. As you move deeper into the greenhouse, the glass grows foggier, the air heavier. You almost forget you're in France. You pass another row of pineapples covered by delicate silk cloths to shield them from a recent cold snap. One has a tiny embroidered bonnet. No joke. It's more fashionably dressed than most villagers outside the palace walls. And yet, there's an odd tenderness to all this artifice. It's madness, sure. But it's also care. For the people who tend these pineapples, this isn't about decadence. It's devotion. They're playing their part in the great, ridiculous theater of status, and every golden fruit that survives the winter is a standing ovation. You step out of the greenhouse at last, breath fogging in the night air. The stars are still out, blinking overhead like old gossipers. Behind you, a door creaks shut, locking in the heat and whispers of the pineapple palace. You glance back once, imagining the plants sleeping under their little quilts of steam and silk. You smile, then head down the gravel path again, thinking not for the first time how strange it is that, in this world, a single fruit can mean so much, and taste so little. By now, you've figured out that pineapples in 18th century France aren't just fruit, they're accessories. Fashion statements. Status amplifiers. And tonight, as you wander toward the service quarters beneath Versailles, you're about to discover that some people would quite literally risk their livelihoods, possibly their heads, for a few sweet hours in the glow of a stolen pineapple. You're in the underbelly of the palace now, all echoing stone and flickering lanterns. The servants' corridors feel like a different world, cooler, earthier, and buzzing with low murmurs and the occasional clang of a dropped ladle. You pass a scullery maid elbow-deep in soapy water. She's humming a lullaby about stolen fruit. Not metaphorical, very literal. Everyone down here knows the rumors. Because every so often, a pineapple disappears. Not permanently, mind you. That would be too bold. No, this is more like borrowing. For display. For status. For one evening's illusion. You slip into a cramped alcove near the kitchen, where a small group of servants huddle together, laughing in hushed tones. One of them, a kitchen boy with perpetually soot-smeared cheeks, tells you about the Comtesse de Villeneuve's ball last week. She didn't have a pineapple, he says with a smirk. But her cousin's housemaid did. And for 6 livres, we let her rent ours. You raise an eyebrow. It stayed on the table all night. He continues. No one noticed it was the same one from the royal pantry. Looked splendid. Whole evening was saved. You realize the pineapple passed through 6 different hands that day, swaddled in linen, transported in a hatbox, and carefully placed on a silver pedestal like a royal baby. By dawn, it was back in the kitchen. Slightly bruised. Still magnificent. These quiet heists aren't uncommon. Nobles don't always ask questions when a pineapple materializes at their salon. Better not to know. If a rival accuses them of borrowing, they feign offense. How dare you suggest I can't grow my own? Some of the best schemes involve the staff who tend the greenhouses. One footman, now legend among his peers, once transported a pineapple to 3 different parties in the span of 1 week, earning enough in hush money tips to pay for his sister's wedding. He even gave the fruit a name. A million, he called it. Because he traveled so gracefully. Historians still argue whether these acts were petty theft or acts of quiet rebellion against a class system that ran on vanity and illusion. Either way, they were flawlessly executed. You hear a new tale tonight. A lady-in-waiting, desperate to impress a duchess, asked her brother's valet to procure something tropical. Within hours, the man had slipped into the royal greenhouse, swapped a decoy for the real thing, and delivered the pineapple just in time for dinner. He spent the next 2 weeks locked in a linen closet pretending to be ill, lest someone connect the fruity dots. There's a hierarchy, even in fruit theft. The boldest attempts involve parties with foreign diplomats, where a well-placed pineapple can suggest alliances far richer than France's actual budget. You sneak past the embassy quarter and overhear a servant say, "We told the Prussian envoy it was from our plantation. In Madagascar." Another laughs. "We don't even have a Madagascar." But deception works. For nobles in these tightrope social games, the appearance of tropical opulence can mean political leverage. A pineapple on the table isn't just a treat, it's a bluff. A way to say, see how global we are? How connected? How superior? And let's not forget the scandalous story of Madame Lefebvre. She once borrowed a pineapple from a marquis's kitchen, but didn't realize it was coated in beeswax to preserve its look. She sliced it, served it, and her guests chewed politely until one brave soul choked slightly and said, "It tastes durable." You follow a narrow hallway to a servant's break room, bare walls, a rickety table, the faint smell of stewed onions. On the table sits a pineapple. Small, a little shriveled, and definitely past its prime. But it's centered like a holy relic. Turns out, this one's retired. Too bruised for nobles, too fragrant to toss. The kitchen keeps it around like a mascot. One quirky detail: the staff here give their pineapples nicknames. You hear about one called Louise, another General Tropique. It's part joke, part superstition. Name it, says a footman, and it'll last longer. You head toward the laundry room, where a starch maid tells you about her cousin who once used a hollowed-out pineapple shell as a hat for a masquerade. No one noticed, she shrugs. They just assumed it was couture. Back in the upper halls, nobles are still toasting each other with glasses of pineapple cordial, likely flavored with apple and lemon, but labeled Ananas for flair. You watch a viscount spin a tale about how he hand-harvested his pineapple on a cliffside plantation in Guadeloupe. He's never left Ile-de-France. But everyone nods along, pretending they believe. Because that's the real magic trick of the pineapple. It allowed everyone to lie beautifully. To construct fantasy out of fruit. To escape reality, even if just for one evening, through the soft shimmer of candlelight and the promise of sweetness. And beneath it all, beneath the lace and powdered faces and stolen centerpieces, it's the servants who hold the truth. They guard it in whispers, share it in laughter, and occasionally, just occasionally, take a bite. You step out of the steamy underworld of pineapple borrowing and back into the main palace, where the air is dry, the ceilings are unnecessarily high, and everyone looks like they've dressed for an opera that happens to involve sword duels. You wander into one of the smaller salons, only to find yourself in a scene that's equal parts fashion show and botanical fever dream. Welcome to the pineapple's cultural takeover. Here, the fruit doesn't sit quietly on silver platters. No, tonight it's embroidered on gowns, woven into stockings, powdered into perfumes, and yes, truly, balanced precariously atop wigs that defy both gravity and good sense. You pause at the doorway, momentarily stunned. One noblewoman sweeps past, her bodice covered in gold-threaded pineapples, each topped with a tiny emerald crown. Another twirls, and her gown billows to reveal a pattern of pineapples so detailed they look sticky. You spot a pair of gentlemen in velvet coats, arguing over who first wore the pineapple cravat. Apparently, it was very daring at last month's masquerade ball. One claims his valet dyed the silk using an actual pineapple reduction. The other insists he simply commissioned a print from a Caribbean painter. The winner? Whoever has the better story. Pineapple imagery has seeped into everything: clothing, architecture, even speech. One lady fans herself and says, "Piquant's attention is sweet, but not pineapple sweet." Whatever that means. You take a breath, nose twitching slightly. That scent, citrusy, syrupy, almost too rich, it's pineapple perfume. Popular among the court's trendsetters, it was sold in small glass vials and promised to evoke the air of paradise. The secret ingredients? A bit of distilled citrus, sugar alcohol, and crushed marigold. No actual pineapple. Just like most pineapple-based things at court, it's all illusion. One fringe tidbit you overhear. A perfumer once crafted an essence so convincing that courtiers wore it behind their ears and inside their gloves. Problem was, bees found it irresistible. You imagine a duchess being chased across a garden maze by a cloud of bees. The cost of beauty. You move deeper into the room and notice the wallpaper. Subtle, at first glance, floral vines and gold, but on closer inspection, the flowers morph into pineapples. Gilded, geometrically impossible pineapples. The motif spreads like ivy across the border of the room, reinforcing what's been true all evening. This fruit isn't just food. It's a visual language. It turns up in porcelain figurines, little dancers holding pineapples aloft like Olympic torches. It hides in coat buttons, fan handles, shoe buckles. You even spot a tiny pineapple dangling from a chatelaine, alongside a sewing thimble and a vinaigrette. The message is clear: wherever you go, the pineapple follows. Historians still argue whether this trend was driven by true admiration for the fruit or by a deeper fear of falling out of style. One scholar described it as status anxiety in edible form. And it tracks. Nobles who couldn't secure real pineapple often overcompensated with pineapple-themed everything else. There's a particularly dramatic example lounging near the fireplace. A man with a powdered wig as wide as a sedan chair is sipping pineapple punch from a goblet shaped like, what else? A pineapple. His waistcoat glitters with seed pearls arranged into tiny fruitlets. He looks like he's wearing a picnic. You approach a fashion sketchbook resting on a table nearby. It's filled with designs from one of the era's most in-demand couturiers. Page after page of pineapple accents, belts, sashes, embroidery schemes. There's even a full-length court gown designed to resemble the fruit itself, a quilted yellow skirt, a corset trimmed in green velvet, and a headpiece of stiffened silk fronds. It's aggressive. You flip the page quickly. In a nearby corner, a quartet of noblewomen debate pineapple symbolism. One says it represents hospitality. Another says it's exotic allure. A third rolls her eyes and mutters, "It's just fashionable indigestion." You like her immediately. You ease into a conversation with a court tailor, who tells you about a duke who demanded his entire household wear pineapple-themed livery for a garden party. The tailor had to invent a new shade of gold just to differentiate between fresh pineapple and caramelized pineapple. Not everyone was impressed. One guest said we looked like kitchen fruit baskets, the tailor says. But I ask you, when did fruit baskets become a bad thing? He gestures toward a mannequin dressed in one of his latest creations, a frock coat with pineapple brocade brass buttons shaped like pineapple rings, and a detachable collar that mimics the serrated leaves. It rustles when you walk, he says proudly. Just like palm trees in Martinique. You don't have the heart to tell him palm trees sound nothing like taffeta. One more thing catches your eye, a hand fan, tucked into a display case. Painted with a pastoral scene, shepherds, sheep, the usual nonsense, but dead center, a pineapple on a tree stump like a strange altar. You wonder if it was a joke. Or a prophecy. And here's the delicious irony. All this style, all this obsession, is rooted in a fruit that barely anyone has actually tasted. They talk about it. They wear it. They worship it. But bite into it? Almost taboo. Why risk breaking the spell? You step away from the salon as the orchestra begins to tune. Music floats into the air, light, airy, self-satisfied. The perfect soundtrack for a world draped in symbols it doesn't fully understand. You glance back one more time. Someone's pineapple hat is slightly off-kilter. They don't notice. But you do. And maybe that's the most pineapple thing of all. Too much flair, not enough balance, and always one sharp leaf away from total absurdity. The music follows you as you drift down the gallery, its notes bouncing off mirrors and marble, growing fainter until all you hear are the low murmurs of politics disguised as pleasantries. Tonight, pineapples aren't just for fashion or dessert. They're on the diplomatic menu, sliced into careful wedges and served with the same precision as a state handshake. You arrive just in time to watch a servant present a silver tray of pineapple slices to a gathering of foreign ambassadors. The room is hushed. Conversations pause as forks delicately pierce golden triangles, mouths open in practiced surprise, and someone breathes. Exquisite. And just like that, the game begins. Pineapple, in this context, is more than food, it's negotiation. The message is clear: if France can grow, import, and serve a fruit this rare, imagine what else she can do. It's soft power with a sharp scent. You hover near the edge of the room, pretending to admire a bust of Minerva while eavesdropping. The Spanish ambassador leans toward his Prussian counterpart and murmurs, "This is real. Not the sugared mockeries they served in Vienna." A few feet away, the Dutch envoy narrows his eyes. He's pretty sure it's the same sugared mockery. Historians still argue whether serving pineapple at diplomatic events was a calculated show of supremacy, or simply a fad gone feral. But either way, it worked. At least for a time. A fringe tale floats your way, of a Swedish diplomat who wrote home insisting he'd made peace with the French solely through the healing power of their pineapple glaze. His letter was stained with what might have been syrup. Or wine. Hard to say. You watch a footman replace the centerpiece, a pineapple carved into a stylized fleur-de-lis. It's so ornate you doubt it was ever edible. Next to it, a small bowl of pineapple jam glistens like topaz. One noble dips a spoon in and says with a wink, "Ah, diplomacy, always a bit sticky." And indeed it is. You trail behind a trio of lesser courtiers hoping to impress the Ottoman delegate. One launches into a tale of a pineapple orchard in Provence, which doesn't exist. Another brags that his cousin once grew one in a cave using mirrors and sheep's breath. The third just holds out a sugared pineapple rind and says, "Taste it. Paradise." The diplomat smiles politely. Doesn't take a bite. Across the room, a heated conversation is unfolding between two court officials. You catch snippets: trade agreements, naval routes, Saint-Domingue, sugar quotas. But what's at the center of the table between them? Pineapple compote in crystal bowls. Because if you're going to disagree, at least do it with dessert. One curious ritual emerges as you observe the gift plate. After the formal banquet, ambassadors are often presented with a small silver tray of pineapple slices to take back to their quarters. It's symbolic, sure, but there's a hidden layer. The quality of the pineapple matters. Better fruit means favor. A mealy slice? That's basically a polite insult with a rind. You spot a nervous attendant whispering to a steward, "He got the wrong plate, switch it before he notices." They do, swiftly, without dropping a crumb. And of course, not all pineapple exchanges are friendly. A rumor circulates tonight about a diplomatic dinner gone sour. Literally. A bowl of fermented pineapple, either through accident or malice, served to a visiting Saxon baron. He interpreted it as a threat. Or possibly a joke. Either way, trade negotiations stalled for 3 weeks. A noblewoman brushes past you, fan fluttering. "They say the Russians brought their own pineapple." She snickers. "Frozen, of course." You try not to laugh. The image of someone pulling a frosty fruit from a fur-lined trunk is too good. Back at the table, a courtier with too much powder in his wig is explaining the flavor profile of French-grown pineapple. "A refined acidity," he claims. "Hints of jasmine and civility." His listener nods solemnly. You suspect either has tasted it. One peculiar item being passed around now is a pineapple liqueur, distilled with botanicals from Marseille and Caribbean rum. The glass glows amber in the candlelight. It smells like melted candy and old money. You sneak a sip, too sweet, but with a bite that lingers. And here's where it gets interesting. The pineapple is being used to mask tension. Sweetness softens hard truths. Between courses, between toasts, between awkward silences where someone remembers that half of France's tropical wealth is built on colonial labor, sugar, pineapples, and human lives. No one mentions that. But it's in the room, thick as the syrup pooling at the bottom of the fruit tray. One ambassador excuses himself, dabbing his lips with a monogrammed napkin. He leaves with a cordial smile and a wedge of pineapple wrapped in silk. You wonder if he'll keep it as a memento, or toss it out the carriage window. The night winds down. Candles gutter. Plates are cleared. But the pineapple remains, the quiet, spiky star of the evening. Untouched now, but still powerful. You exit with the rest, the echo of polished shoes fading into the marble halls, and you realize the fruit did its job. It dazzled. It distracted. It sweetened the sting. And tomorrow? It'll do it all again. You wake early, well, early for court life. The sun barely filters through the embroidered drapes, casting soft gold across polished floors, and the air already smells faintly of caramelized sugar and rose water. Today, you're slipping behind the scenes again, this time into the offices of royal finance, where ledgers don't lie, even when everyone else does. Because as absurd as it sounds, someone has to pay for all this pineapple pageantry. You ease open the heavy oak door to the intendants, the administrative wing of the palace, where clerks and accountants scurry like well-dressed ants. Parchment rustles. Ink drips. And voices murmur numbers that sound more like spells than sums. You slip past a harried-looking man with an ink-stained cravat and peer over his shoulder. He's recording the cost of transporting 2 pineapples from Saint-Domingue, shipping, insurance, customs, bribes. Your jaw tightens as you read the final total, enough to feed an entire village for 2 months. And that's before the greenhouse maintenance and coal expenses. One clerk notices your interest. "Ah," he says, gesturing toward the entry. You wouldn't believe how often pineapples appear in these books. Ornamental fruit display, 420 livres. That's more than my yearly stipend. And I copy every single invoice by hand. You nod solemnly, pretending you're also in the pineapple business. He grins and hands you a fresh page. Here's one, waxed fruit likeness commissioned after bruising of original. Yes, even fake pineapples have line items. As you move through the records, a pattern emerges. Pineapple-related expenses are everywhere, coded as botanical exhibitions, tropical entertainment, horticultural indulgence. It's like everyone knows it's ridiculous but refuses to say it out loud. This is, after all, a kingdom where appearances are reality. And yet the contrast is jarring. You step outside, passing through the kitchen courtyard, and see delivery carts filled with wilted vegetables meant for staff and lower nobles. The potatoes are soft. The bread is yesterday's. The peasants in the villages beyond Versailles are eating worse. Much worse. Historians still argue whether this extravagance directly fueled revolutionary unrest. Some say it was just one piece of a rotting puzzle. Others insist that pineapple madness was its own brand of political blindness. Proof that the elite had floated so far from reality, they could no longer see the ground. You return inside, now armed with knowledge that feels sticky. You pass a hallway where a tutor is giving noble children a lesson on trade routes. One tiny marquis in training raises his hand. Is it true we get pineapples from pirates? The tutor coughs. Privateers, monsieur. But yes. Sometimes, when ships were late or embargoes in place, pineapples were smuggled, crammed into brandy barrels or hidden beneath sacks of cocoa. You picture a pirate, gold tooth flashing, slicing into a fruit more valuable than silver. Not to eat it, just to sell it to a desperate duke. You wander next into a drawing room where a group of nobles are hosting what they call a pineapple auction. It's part game, part mockery, part actual desperation. They're bidding on a single fruit, just arrived from Bordeaux. The auctioneer starts at 300 livres. One gentleman offers a necklace. Another offers an entire set of Sèvres porcelain. Someone jokes. What if we wager a servant? Laughter bubbles up, a little too sharp. In a dark corner, you hear an aide mutter. We could have funded the opera season with this. And he's not wrong. You pass a stack of gazettes, court newsletters where nobles advertise their gardens. One headline reads, Chateau de Maligny to host fruit soirée featuring authentic ananas. There's a footnote. Patrons required to bring a minimum of 2 pineapples or their equivalent in gold. You wonder how they calculate that equivalency. Pineapple inflation must be brutal. A fringe anecdote makes its way to you as you sip tepid tea in the corridor. A lesser baron once forged documents claiming to have started the first pineapple cooperative in Normandy. He charged visitors to tour his orchard, which was actually just one rotating fruit on a mirrored platform. It took months before anyone noticed. Meanwhile, back in the Intendance, one of the scribes shows you a separate book, unofficial, of course. This one tracks gifts to and from nobles, including pineapples. Turns out, gifting a pineapple has its own etiquette. Wrapped in silk, generous. Wrapped in muslin, passable. Wrapped in brown paper? Social suicide. You glance over the margins and spot notes in Latin, Greek, even a few botanical sketches. Someone's treating this like holy scripture. You trace a finger along the numbers and wonder how much of France's debt is tied to tropical fantasy. How many lives, how many dinners, how many revolutions does it take to balance the books? You exit through a servant's stairwell, where a maid mutters about how the marquise has forbidden onions in her soup. They offend the pineapple's aroma. You stifle a laugh. Then remember she's dead serious. Back outside, a new shipment has arrived. 2 crates marked with royal wax seals, carried by 4 men, gently lowered onto velvet cushions. A crowd gathers, whispering. They're from Cayenne. No, Brazil. I heard they cost more than a carriage. You know the truth, they cost more than most lives. And still, someone will slice them, serve them, and smile like the budget's perfectly balanced. You return to the palace in the late afternoon, golden light casting long shadows across the marble floors and painting the mirrors with gentle fire. The buzz tonight isn't about taste or diplomacy or who fainted at last night's banquet. No, tonight's whisper trail follows something altogether more curious: the world of fake pineapples. Because when everyone wants a fruit they can't afford, or one that simply doesn't exist at the moment, well, you invent it. You find yourself in a parlor where the windows have been thrown open, the air swirling with the scent of lilacs and melted beeswax. A group of courtiers, each dressed like they've fallen face first into an embroidery basket, cluster around a display table. And on that table sits a pineapple. Or is it? You move closer. It gleams under the chandelier. Too perfect. Too symmetrical. Too dust-free. You reach out. Tap it lightly. Wood. A court sculptor beams beside it. Carved from sycamore, he declares. Polished with orange oil and sealed with sap. Can fool a dinner party for up to 3 hours, 5 with proper lighting. Welcome to the shadow economy of status. Replica pineapples made of wax, porcelain, wood, even painted papier-mâché. They sit on sideboards. They star in paintings. They decorate salon mantels, all while posing as their fleshy, fragrant cousins. Historians still argue whether these were desperate substitutes or bold statements of aesthetic rebellion. Were nobles fooling guests, or themselves? You lean over another replica, this one crafted from dyed beeswax. The maker leans in, whispering. We warm them slightly before display. It releases a scent. Not pineapple, lemon mixed with vanilla, but it's enough. You inhale. It does, faintly, smell like dessert and delusion. These fake fruits don't just sit idly either. They have stories. One marquise boasts that her wax pineapple attended 6 salons in 1 week. Another claims hers was blessed by a bishop before a masquerade. A third swears her porcelain version once fooled the king's valet. You duck into a dressing room where a maid is dusting what looks like a pineapple-shaped jewelry box. My lady stores her fan powder inside, she says, opening the top to reveal tiny drawers lined in silk. She calls it tropical discretion. The trend doesn't stop at display. Tonight there's a gown being stitched upstairs with pineapples embroidered from actual gold thread. The seamstress downstairs mutters, should have just pinned a coin purse to her chest. Would have been lighter. You overhear a particularly awkward encounter. A young noble introduces what he swears is a fresh pineapple from Batavia, only to have it melt slowly during the meal. By dessert, it had collapsed into a waxy puddle. His mother hasn't spoken to him since. Then there's the curious case of the noble who tried to pass off a painted melon as a pineapple. He spent days carving the right shape, painting the rind, and topping it with glued-on leaves. It worked briefly, until a guest leaned in and said, "Why does it smell like cucumber?" But here's the real twist. Some nobles preferred fake pineapples. Less mess. No rotting. No risk of ants or embarrassing soft spots mid-banquet. And no temptation to slice and share, because nothing ruins status faster than sharing your power. So fake pineapples let you flaunt wealth without giving any of it away. You stumble into a salon where an artisan is holding court, showing off his collection. He's brought samples, a velvet pineapple, for winter soirees, a mirrored one, for garden balls, even one with tiny hidden compartments for notes and secrets. It once held a poem, he says with pride, and a small opium lozenge. A fringe story floats by, a whisper of a court lady who kept a mechanical pineapple. Wind it up, and it slowly opened to reveal a music box that played a tropical waltz. It broke after a week, but the story outlived the mechanism. One nobleman laughs as he passes you, lifting his goblet in salute. I have 12 pineapples in my salon. Not a single one edible. And yet, I win every conversation. It's not just about deception, you realize. It's about decoration, about transforming the idea of fruit into an emblem, a badge of elite belonging. In a world where perception is everything, what better accessory than a fruit so rare it's practically mythical? Fake pineapples begin to seem like courtly mirrors, all reflection, no substance. A perfect metaphor, really. You make your way back toward the central ballroom, passing a side table where someone has placed a pineapple under a bell jar. It's not real, but it glows under the glass like it's been canonized. And maybe in this world it has. By now you've traced the pineapple's journey from exotic rarity to fraudulent fashion statement. But if you really want to understand how deep the obsession goes, you have to slip into the shadows, into the kitchens, laundry rooms, and staff staircases of Versailles. Because behind every golden display, there's an army of servants making it all seem effortless. Tonight you find yourself ducking under a lintel into the kitchen corridor, where the scent of roasted meat and baked sugar hangs low and sweet. Copper pots clatter, aprons flutter, and pineapple secrets hum beneath every whispered conversation. You're greeted by a baker's assistant carrying a tray of pineapple-shaped tartlets, none of which contain even a single thread of the actual fruit. Apricot and apple, he says proudly, with ginger for kick. No one notices. He grins. They don't taste with their tongues. They taste with their egos. The head cook, an enormous man with eyebrows like hedgerows, wipes his brow with a cloth and mutters, "It's always the pineapple. Never the pastry." The moment we bring one out, the room goes quiet. He pulls open a pantry and gestures inside. At the center, one single pineapple, nestled like a relic in a velvet-lined box. That, he says, has been to 6 different salons this week. Never even sliced. You pass into the scullery where a group of maids are practicing reactions. You heard right. One girl clutches a paper fan to her chest and gasps, eyes wide. "Is that a pineapple?" she recites, then tries it again with more breathlessness. They giggle. Madam wants us to act surprised. Every time. Even if we saw it yesterday. You catch wind of another secret, some households have. Pineapple reveals. Choreographed down to the second. The lighting is adjusted. Music softens. Servants glide in with the fruit on a mirrored tray, moving as if in a religious procession. It's all theater, one butler says, but the stakes are social death. Historians still argue whether the staff merely participated in the pineapple ritual or were in fact its choreographers. After all, they were the ones moving the fruit from party to party, keeping it polished, fresh-looking, and gloriously mysterious. In many ways, the pineapple's power depended entirely on the people who never got to taste it. You step into a dim hallway where 2 footmen are whispering. One tells the tale of the countess who wept because her pineapple centerpiece wilted before the guests arrived. "We tried everything," he says. "Fanned it. Spritzed it with rosewater. Wrapped it in silk." He sighs. Still drooped. Like a broken promise. A quirky tale emerges about a maitre d' who developed a signature walk, slow, reverent, measured to create maximum suspense as he approached a dining table with the pineapple. Guests would literally stop mid-sentence to watch it glide into view. He was famous, says one kitchen girl. They called him the Fruit Whisperer. You wander deeper down a stairwell that leads to the staff quarters. Here, the mood is lighter. There's laughter. Singing. Someone strums a lute. And in the corner sits an old wax pineapple, slightly melted, perched atop a barrel like a mascot. We call her Lady Ananas. Someone tells you. She's seen more noble dinners than the king. But beneath the jokes, you sense a quiet power. The staff know things. They know which guests sniff the pineapple but don't eat. Who pretends they've tasted one before. Who sneaks a slice into their pocket for later, as if hoarding luxury. One maid describes how she swapped a Rio pineapple for a wax one mid-dinner just to see if anyone would notice. They didn't. She smirks. Still applauded when it came in. Still moaned like it was heaven. You're beginning to suspect the entire court is a stage, and the servants are the playwrights. You return upstairs to a guest parlor where the Marquis is hosting a pineapple tasting. He's hired musicians, lit special candles, even summoned a poet to recite an ode to tropical fruit. You spot a servant in the corner mouthing the words, "He's heard this poem 6 times this week." The Marquis lifts his knife, slices the fruit, and offers a sliver to each guest. The room holds its breath. They chew. Sigh. Nod with dramatic delight. But you notice something strange. One slice stays untouched on a plate. Forgotten. Like once the performance was done, the taste didn't really matter. You step back into the corridor, now echoing with the clatter of evening cleanup. Dishes being scraped. Linen bundled. A kitchen girl hums a lullaby about pineapples, and a boy next to her mutters, "They don't love the fruit. They love the fuss." And maybe that's the truth. The pineapple, in all its golden glory, has become a machine. A perfectly crafted illusion powered not by nobles, but by the quiet hands that keep it polished, positioned, and preposterously adored. Without the servants, the pineapple would just be a fruit. With them? It's a phenomenon. Night falls heavy and slow, pressing against the glass panes of Versailles' lesser-known salons, and you find yourself stepping away from the court's bustling heart and toward the quieter edges, those private estates outside the city where the elite try to outgrow each other. Literally. Because here, pineapples aren't just acquired, they're cultivated. Welcome to the high-stakes world of botanical bragging rights. You arrive at the countryside estate of the Comte de Sévigné, who's invited a dozen select guests to view what he calls the finest pineapple in continental Europe. The garden is sprawling and rigidly symmetrical, hedges like green fortresses, statues gazing off in melancholy, and tucked behind the orangery, you're led to a small glass structure built entirely for one plant. Inside, warm air hits your face like a damp scarf. You smell coal, compost, and that deep vegetal scent that always makes you feel like something's either about to bloom or decompose. And there it is, the Comte's pride. A squat little pineapple perched on its leafy crown, encircled by mirrors and bathed in filtered morning light. You're not even allowed to touch it. We sing to it, the Comte says, folding his gloved hands. Latin hymns on Thursdays. Rousseauian sonnets on Sundays. You blink. He's serious. Botanical nationalism is a real thing here. The French aristocracy isn't just importing pineapples anymore, they're competing to grow them. At home. In soil they insist is specially amended with horse manure, wine sediment, or, in one case, blessed sea salt carried from Marseille in a silver thimble. Sure. Historians still argue whether these homegrown pineapples ever actually rivaled their colonial cousins in quality. Most evidence points to no. But again, flavor was not the point. The ability to say, "I grew this," while gesturing to a vaguely yellow sphere the size of a cantaloupe, that was prestige distilled. You travel next to Madame Darbois' estate, where she unveils her pineapple nursery. A series of glass cloches, each sheltering a tiny, barely sprouted fruitlet. She gestures proudly. "This one I named Desiree." She's shy. "This one is Petit Roy." "He's coming along nicely, aren't you, mon Petit Roy?" She tickles the leaves. You try not to look alarmed. A gardener nearby whispers, "They haven't fruited in 3 years." But she throws dinner parties just to discuss their progress. The guests coo and admire the stunted green lumps like infants in a bassinet. And then there are the brag books. Nobles keep journals, some leather-bound, some ribbon-tied, where they record daily pineapple observations, growth rates, leaf angle, moisture notes. You flip through one and find this gem. January 4th, spoke gently to an honest primer about resilience. Mistook my words for judgment. Browning continued. One eccentric duke has commissioned oil portraits of his pineapples at various stages: flowering, fruiting, post-harvest. In each, he stands beside them, hand on hip, expression proud but distant, like an emperor flanked by leafy children. You catch a glimpse of one painting. The fruit looks sad. A fringe but real practice? Competitive ripening. 2 nobles grow pineapples in mirrored conditions and see whose fruit matures faster. The loser has to host a luncheon and serve the winner's pineapple on their own silverware. The scandal. The shame. Of course, faking ripeness is a temptation. You overhear a steward admit to blow-drying a pineapple to give it that sun-kissed look before an inspection. "It shriveled," he admits. "But it smelled so accomplished." You begin to understand that these estates are more than playgrounds for wealth, they're laboratories of vanity. You find a greenhouse with a pineapple staked upright, surrounded by tiny painted flags. Each flag represents a different mineral we tested, the head gardener says proudly. We're narrowing in on the perfect terroir. He pauses. We believe music helps too, a lady passing by adds. I read that pineapples prefer flutes over violins. She doesn't cite a source. She doesn't need to. One whispered story makes you choke on your candy ginger. A noble couple faked the growth of their pineapple using a melon carved and glued with individual pineapple scales. It held up for a month, until a visiting botanist tapped it too hard and it imploded. The couple fled to Italy for the season, to recover from embarrassment. Recovery, you suspect, was not swift. But not all is failure. Some pineapples do grow. Slowly. Reluctantly. Sometimes deliciously. And when they do, the parties that follow are legendary. You get wind of one such gathering, an outdoor feast thrown by a family who managed to ripen 2 pineapples in the same year. They hosted a gala called La Dos sur Jamel, the twin sweetness. Guests wore gold leaf on their cheeks. The fruit was paraded on silk cushions and served with a quartet playing an original composition titled Ode à l'ananas. You hear someone murmur, that was the last good pineapple grown in Burgundy. They say it like it's a dynasty. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows across glass domes and pineapple leaves. Somewhere, a harp begins to play. You watch as 2 gardeners gently cover the fruit for the night, tucking in the soil like it's a toddler. And it hits you again, this isn't farming. It's performance. It's confession. It's courtship. The pineapple is no longer foreign. It's domesticated ambition, leafy and petulant, soaking up attention and coal-fired air. And as you walk back down the gravel path, the night settling on your shoulders, you realize that in this country of mirrors and masquerades, nothing says I matter, quite like a fruit you grew yourself, even if it tastes like damp hay and aristocratic effort. The sky turns slate gray as you return to Versailles, clouds bruised and heavy with the threat of rain. The change in weather doesn't matter much to the salons inside, where laughter rings, candles flicker, and pineapples still reign as the undisputed monarchs of the tabletop. But beneath the surface of powdered faces and syruped fruit lies a deeper rot. Tonight you stumble into scandals where pineapples are no longer just symbols of status. They're silent witnesses to downfall. You slip into a side chamber during an evening gathering, lured by the scent of stewed pineapple and scandal. A group of courtiers huddles near the fireplace, whispering as though they're in a confessional booth. The subject? The Duchesse de Montclair. Her household grew a pineapple. Just one. A rare, glorious, honey-sweet miracle of horticultural science. She served it at her birthday banquet last week, and now she's hiding in her country estate. Why? Because the pineapple had mold. Not visible, not obvious. But halfway through the first slice, someone pointed out the soft dark streak running through the flesh. Gasps. A fork clattered to the floor. And then came the worst part. Guests didn't know whether to acknowledge the flaw or pretend they didn't see it. The performance collapsed. It wasn't about food, it was about trust. And the Duchesse's reputation? Spoiled faster than overripe fruit. Historians still argue whether this incident actually destroyed her marriage or just catalyzed the unraveling that was already in motion. Either way, she lost a lot more than face. She lost her place. You catch another tale near the billiard room. The Vicomte de Brives attempted to grow a pineapple in secret to impress a visiting envoy. But he used salted water by mistake. The result? A mutant fruit that bloated and burst days before the event. In desperation, he borrowed one from the Marechal's greenhouse, but the Marechal found out. The fallout wasn't public. It was quieter. Invitations stopped arriving. His creditors became louder. His pineapple-shaped punch bowl? Sold at auction. Back in the Grand Salon, a new drama brews. Madame Rancourt's wax pineapple centerpiece is melting under the heat of a misplaced candelabrum. A small puddle glistens on the silver tray. She's trying to laugh it off, but her eyes dart. Guests whisper. You pass into a quieter corridor and find a lady's maid in tears. Her mistress was accused of serving a second-hand pineapple, one previously displayed at the Duc d'Orléans hunting lodge. It was the same fruit. She sobs. We didn't think anyone would remember. But they did. Oh, they always do. There's something Shakespearean in how swiftly fortunes turn. One day you're praised for presenting pineapple tarts flecked with gold leaf. The next, you're mocked for a bruised rind. A fringe anecdote reaches your ear about a clergyman who condemned the pineapple as an idol of excess. He warned it would bring ruin to those who worshipped it. Naturally, the court laughed. Then his niece was caught stealing a pineapple from the royal kitchen. Awkward. One of the more whispered tales tonight is about a discreet liaison between a married countess and a young court composer. Their meeting place? A greenhouse. Their code word? Pineapple. The affair ended badly. The countess's husband had the composer dismissed and shipped to Lyon, and she, humiliated, ignored, and shunned, was last seen attending a salon with a hollow papier-mâché pineapple. People thought it was ironic. It wasn't. You pause outside the music room where a small group sings a duet composed for a noble wedding. The lyrics compare the bride's beauty to a pineapple's golden crown. Everyone claps politely. But someone mutters, "Let's hope her marriage doesn't turn as fast as the fruit." You begin to notice a pattern. In every scandal, the pineapple is both innocent and guilty. It's never to blame, but it's always involved. Like a masked witness at a masked ball. A steward pulls you aside, whispers a new name, Madame de la Fère. She hoarded 3 pineapples during last year's famine, he says. Kept them under glass. Didn't eat them. Just stared at them. The people outside were begging for grain. When news of her hoard reached the town, someone threw a brick through her salon window. The pineapples were removed the next day. Even the artists have joined the critique. You pass a display of caricatures, satirical prints sold quietly in the arcades of Paris. One shows a nobleman praying to a pineapple shrine. Another depicts a pineapple with teeth, biting the hand of a greedy marquise. The captions are cruel. And accurate. Back in the hallway, you glimpse a young nobleman pacing nervously. He'd promised his betrothed a fresh pineapple for their engagement dinner. His shipment? Delayed by storms in the Caribbean. He's been offered a fake one, hastily painted. He hasn't decided if the risk is worth it. If she notices, he says, she'll leave me. It's hard to tell whether he's joking. And maybe that's the most dangerous thing. Pineapples have become emotional currency. Proof of love. Proof of loyalty. Proof of control in a world growing increasingly unstable. You end your night in a chamber lit by one trembling candle. A single, shriveled pineapple sits in a glass case. It's gray, brittle, and clearly years old. But next to it is a plaque, the last pineapple of the House of Fontenay. You're told the family fell into disgrace soon after. But the fruit remains. Preserved. Revered. Untouched. A warning, perhaps. Because when you make a fruit a symbol, you give it power. And power, as this court has proven time and again, can turn sweet things bitter. The morning after a scandal always carries a strange calm at Versailles, as though the palace itself holds its breath, waiting to see who survived the latest social execution. You rise before the salons fill, wandering through the quieter wings of the palace, where whispers linger longer than perfume, and where another kind of pineapple legacy is being forged, satire. Because when status symbols get too ridiculous, the sharpest minds start sharpening their quills. And here in the undercurrent of French high society, the pineapple becomes less of a fruit and more of a punchline. You slip into a side gallery off the library, where pamphlets, prints, and illicit verses pass hand to hand like currency. The table is littered with the latest satirical publications, cheaply printed but densely clever. The cover of one reads, Le Fruit de Faux, the Fool's Fruit. You flip through it, and immediately find a hand-drawn cartoon, a nobleman bowing to a pineapple perched on a throne, with the caption, Mon Roi à Points, my king of spikes. You chuckle. And then you realize the nobleman in the sketch looks suspiciously like the Duc de Chatters. You glance around the room. No one here is laughing loudly, but the smirks are sharp. A group of younger nobles leaf through another booklet, their gloved fingers smudging ink. It's filled with pineapple proverbs, including such gems as, "A man who eats pineapple in silence shall soon beg for bread aloud, and one who wears fruit on his head should not mock the orchard." Historians still argue whether these pamphlets marked the beginning of a broader cultural shift, or merely scratched the surface of court satire. But they were undeniably popular. And dangerous. Authors often published anonymously, lest they find themselves suddenly unfashionable, or arrested. One fringe piece that catches your eye is titled The Gospel of Ananus, written in the style of biblical verse. "And lo, the fruit of the islands came unto the nobles, and they didst exalt it above reason, and it became their downfall." Subtle? Not remotely. You pass a low table where caricatures are being sorted. One shows a lady with a pineapple wig so large that birds are nesting inside it. Another depicts a duel being fought not with swords, but with overripe pineapples. A favorite among the younger crowd shows the king's advisors consulting a pineapple perched on a velvet pillow. The caption reads, "His Majesty's most refreshing counsel." You meet a young engraver, face speckled with ink, who grins as he points to one of his own works, The Enlightened Pineapple, a fruit wearing spectacles, reading the social contract. "I sell them at the market under a fake name," he tells you. Madame Rousseau bought 3. In another corner, a secret salon is being held, a gathering of poets, thinkers, and low-ranking nobles with a flair for subversion. You listen to a short performance of satirical verse. "O pineapple, crowned in gold, thy sweetness shallow, thy praises bold. The court shall rot before thy core, yet still they knock upon thy door." A round of soft applause follows. Someone offers slices of turnip carved to look like pineapple. "Irony tartare," the host calls it. You overhear a whispered exchange between 2 actors from the Comédie Française. They're planning a new play, a farce titled La Passion de l'Ananas. The premise? A noblewoman falls in love with her pineapple and refuses all suitors, believing the fruit to be her reincarnated husband. You snort. Then one actor says, "We're trying to get it approved for the winter festival." You wish them luck. And a fast escape route. One piece of satire has been circulating so widely it's earned a nickname, The Peel. It's a serialized comic in which a pineapple runs for mayor of Paris, promising better trade routes and fresher perfume. The punchline? It wins. You spot a child sneaking a copy under his coat. Even the staff are reading it now. Of course, not everyone's amused. You hear of a nobleman who challenged a satirist to a duel after being depicted as a pineapple-crazed fool. The satirist declined. "I do not duel over fruit," he reportedly said. "Only over truths." Even some nobles begin to lean into the ridicule. You meet the Marquise de la Berthe, who now hosts themed dinners with titles like Pineapple Purgatory and Ananas Anonymous. At her last event, she wore a gown printed with every known pineapple pun, and carried a papier-mâché fruit that doubled as a wine decanter. "If you're going to be mocked," she tells you with a shrug, "mock yourself first." The laughter cuts through the court's usual perfume of pretense. And in that laughter, something real stirs. Doubt. Awareness. The beginning of a question no one wants to ask aloud. What are we doing? You end your evening in a quiet study, a candle flickering beside a stack of unsold pamphlets. One shows the guillotine, with a pineapple where the blade should be. It's exaggerated. It's dark. But it's no longer entirely impossible. Because every joke lands harder when it's no longer just a joke. And when a fruit becomes a symbol too bloated with meaning, eventually, someone sticks a pin in it. A slow tension creeps through the corridors of Versailles. It's not spoken openly, yet, but it settles into corners, stirs under dinner conversations, and lingers in the eyes of servants who used to flinch when addressed and now hold gazes half a second too long. You wake to find the salons hushed. The fountains gurgle like always. The perfumes still cling to the air. But something feels different. And tonight the pineapple, once a glittering crown of privilege, is no longer untouchable. You make your way into the Hall of Mirrors. It's quieter than usual. A few nobles whisper in cloisters of silk and shadow, but the mood is strained. One woman clutches a letter with shaking hands. Another counts coins beneath her fan. It's 1,789. And the pineapple, so long a beacon of excess, is now a flashing symbol of everything that's wrong. Word spreads fast, about bread riots, about Paris, about heads rolling not metaphorically but very literally. You pass a butler who's lost the usual stiffness in his posture. He doesn't bother to correct you when you call him monsieur. He simply nods and says, "Have you heard? The Bastille." You pass through the kitchens, now stripped of the usual cheer. There's a pineapple sitting on a chipped plate, ignored. That's the first sign. Because when the fruit no longer mesmerizes the room, when it's just another object, just another imported vanity, the illusion is broken. Outside, you hear a murmur, not gossip. Chanting. Real, ragged, human voices rising beyond the palace gates. You race upstairs to one of the drawing rooms. A nobleman, once dazzling, now visibly sweating, shouts at a footman. "Bring the pineapple! Put it on the balcony! Let them see we have fruit!" The servant doesn't move. A moment passes. And then he says flatly, "They have torches." Historians still argue whether it was a real incident or an apocryphal legend born in the chaos. But someone claims a pineapple was indeed held aloft from a balcony like a ward against revolution. It didn't help. If anything, it made things worse. You duck into a salon that's been ransacked not by rioters, but by its owners. They're packing, stuffing jewels and family heirlooms into luggage. One marquise is tearing down her pineapple-themed wallpaper. "It's tasteless now," she says, as if it ever wasn't. A servant in the hallway carries out a tray of smashed fruit. Real pineapple, bruised and splattered. No one protests. Outside, carts roll away from the palace, some loaded with trunks, others filled with looted items. You see someone holding a wax pineapple like a trophy. "For the village fete," they say. To show them what they wasted their bread on. Back in the Grand Trianon, someone has painted graffiti across the colonnade. "Du pain, pas d'ananas." Bread, not pineapples. It's crude. But it lands like a punch. You hear about nobles disguising themselves as gardeners, trying to flee Versailles unnoticed. One wears a jacket still dusted with pineapple embroidery. "They'll never believe I'm a peasant," he says, tugging at the seams. In a more distant wing you find a greenhouse. The heat is still on. The glass is still intact. But the pineapples? Trampled. Slashed. One stands upright but has been carved like a jack-o'-lantern. Its eyes are wide, its mouth open. You don't laugh. A fringe rumor surfaces. Someone tried to bribe a revolutionary officer with a pineapple. He took it, and then arrested them anyway. "That fruit's paid for too much already," he reportedly said. You overhear a quiet conversation between two elderly nobles. One says, "Perhaps we should have grown onions." The other stares at her shoes. Outside the city, rumors begin to ripple. The estate of a pineapple magnate is burned. A shipment of tropical fruit is dumped into the Seine. A waxwork shop is looted, its pineapple models stomped and melted. By the end of the week, no one wants to be seen near a pineapple. You return to Versailles one last time. The halls echo. Tapestries hang limp. A faint smell of mildew sets in, where before it was citrus and honey. In a forgotten corner of the kitchens, a pineapple remains. No one's claimed it. No one's pretending anymore. Because pineapples, for all their glitter and gold, couldn't save the monarchy. Couldn't feed the hungry. Couldn't stop the blade. And the sharp irony? Those spiky crowns, once adored for their symbolism, now echo another, more deadly point. The storm has passed, but what remains is not silence. It's a different kind of noise. The rumble of change. The crinkle of crumbling paper as titles are burned. The clink of coins dropped into a servant's hand who's now his own master. Versailles breathes, but she breathes differently now. And somewhere within her battered bones, the last whisper of pineapple lingers. You return to the city, Not the courtly city of fans and fictions, but Paris proper. Streets still scarred, walls still ash-smudged. Revolution has redrawn the map, and the pineapple, once the golden sun of elite desire, has become a ghost. No longer hunted. No longer displayed. For a time, not even spoken of. You pass a pastry shop in the Marais, its windows streaked with flour. The baker nods as he rolls out dough. No more ananas glacés, he mutters. They turn too bitter. And yet, nothing truly disappears. Because tonight you take a small step forward in time. It's the early 19th century now. France is rebuilding, resetting, reinventing. Napoleon has come and gone like a storm in polished boots, and a new class of people, merchants, inventors, readers, dreamers, fills the void the old nobility left behind. One of them owns a bistro in Montmartre. Not fancy. Not poor. Somewhere in between. And there, on a plate behind the counter, you see it, a ring of pineapple. Real. Canned. Imported from the new global trade web that doesn't require a king's signature or a botanist's miracle. You taste it. It's sweet, yes, but also metallic. Tangy in that preserved way. It doesn't whisper of luxury. It just is. Historians still debate whether the pineapple's power truly vanished or merely shifted. Some argue it lost all meaning. Others say it gained a new one, resilience. Mass production made the pineapple democratic. No longer a display of power, but of access. You visit a market in Lyon, decades later. A vendor slices pineapple for tourists. Tropical treat, he says. Came through the canal last week. He says it like it's ordinary. That's what makes it extraordinary. One fringe discovery, a letter from an elderly former courtier, long retired to the countryside. She writes to her niece in 1832 about a dream. I was in Versailles again. I carried a pineapple in my arms like a child. Everyone was barefoot. We fed it to the birds. It's a dream, yes? But dreams often tell more truth than memory. You continue forward, drifting now through a department store in 1920s Paris. Art Deco swirls on the wallpaper. The pineapple has returned, stylized, simplified, and stitched onto cushions. It's not royalty anymore. It's motif. Jump to the 1970s. Neon signs, record stores, bell-bottoms. A cocktail bar in Montparnasse serves pineapple punch. No silk. No fanfare. Just ice and music and people dancing in shirts printed with spiky fruit. And finally, you land in the now. A small cafe, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop. The air smells of espresso and toasted bread. The waiter smiles as he hands you the menu. There it is. Pizza all'ananas. Pineapple pizza. The great divider. You order it, of course. The crust is soft, the sauce sweet. The pineapple is warm, caramelized, unapologetic. You take a bite. And you laugh. Not because it's bad. But because if any 18th century noble were here now, watching you casually devour something they once wept over, they would faint into a linen napkin. The pineapple has come full circle. No longer rare. No longer revered. And yet still here. And maybe that's the secret. Things that survive aren't always the ones protected most fiercely. Sometimes they're the ones that adapt. So here's to the fruit that once made and unmade reputations. That demanded glass palaces, inspired perfumes, ruined marriages, launched satire, and witnessed revolution. And now? It's a topping. A joke. A memory. But also, somehow, a triumph. Because it didn't disappear. It just settled down. The lights are dim now. The grand halls of Versailles fade into soft memory, and the laughter, the scandals, the fanfares, all drift like candle smoke in a still room. You've walked alongside kings and courtiers, chefs and servants, poets and frauds. All for a single fruit. Let that settle for a moment. Imagine the pineapple again. Not perched on a silver platter, not spinning under mirrored candlelight, not even being passed hand to hand in shadowy servant corridors, but resting in the palm of your hand. Just fruit. Just texture and juice and sunlight locked in time. It reminds you how quickly things change. And how often the symbols we worship turn silly in hindsight, or sacred, if we're lucky. And maybe that's the soft lesson tonight. Status comes and goes, fashion folds and fades, but the things we chase always tell us who we are. And what we fear. And what we hope to be seen holding, even if we never take a bite. So let your breath ease. Let your shoulders soften. Let the story mellow in your chest like a warm sweetness after a long day. The pineapple sleeps now. Not in velvet-lined greenhouses or ivory bowls, but in our stories, our jokes, our pizzas, and yes, our dreams. You can sleep now, too. Rest well, traveler of time.